For a while now, I have been what I like to call a roller coaster enthusiast. I've been passionate about visiting theme parks and riding roller coasters, and I've also made efforts to visit some of the best theme parks for coasters in the United States. In this video, I will discuss the history and journey of me being a roller coaster enthusiast. This is based on a video I made 2 years ago on my other channel, Austin's Life, that of which I uploaded just months prior to creating this channel. My coaster count and theme park experiences have definitely changed since then, so I would like to make an updated version on this channel. Before I begin, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel with post notifications on to be notified of more theme park related content. To start off, my journey begins in the summer of 2014, so yeah, it's definitely been a while. I was just a young child at the time, and I struggled with an intense fear of large-scale roller coasters, and I wouldn't dare ride a coaster with a vertical lift or drop, nor would I ride rides with any inversions. Around this time, however, my family decided to take a vacation to Southern California, which included a visit to each of the Disneyland parks. On this theme park visit, I decided to face my fear and conquer my first roller coaster with an inversion, which was at the time called California Screamin'. I was very nervous waiting in line for this coaster, but nevertheless, I managed to ride it. In the end, I enjoyed it, and I didn't find the loop to be such a scary element. If anything, I found the launch to be the scary part. I ended up getting 2 rides on this coaster that day, my second time at night. However, I have not managed to ride it or revisit the park since then, though I hope to return sometime soon. Shortly after this vacation, I decided to kick the thrills up a notch. My family took a park trip to a theme park on the opposite side of the country, that of which being Universal Studios Florida in Orlando. During this visit, I got my first ever ride on Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at night. This was my tallest and fastest coaster credit at the time, and I definitely enjoyed it as a new enthusiast. Even today, I still think it's one of the better coasters in its park. Just a month or two later, I wanted to go to a Six Flags park for the first time, so my parents took me to Six Flags Over Georgia in Austell, Georgia. Unfortunately, I somewhat regret this park trip only because I was just a little too short to ride the B&M coasters in the park, which included Goliath, Batman the Ride, Superman Ultimate Flight, and Georgia Scorcher. The best coaster I rode that day was Daredevil Dive, which I remember being a fun coaster. The rest, not so much. Ninja and Georgia Cyclone remain my least favorite coasters to this day. I'm aware that Ninja has been renovated and Georgia Cyclone has had an RMC conversion, but I am yet to give this park a redemption visit, which I would like to do at some point. This also means I still do not have the B&M credits at this park. In 2015, I reached the 54-inch height requirement for B&M coasters and other thrill rides, so some of the B&M credits I got that year included the original version of the Incredible Hulk coaster and the Dragon Challenge coasters, both of which were at Universal's Islands of Adventure in Orlando, as well as Manta and Kraken at SeaWorld Orlando. I also rode Rock and Roller Coaster for the first time that year at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. This coaster low-key intimidated me with its launch for years, since its launch is actually pretty intense, but I still loved this coaster both at the time and to this day. In 2016, I conquered yet another milestone credit. In June of that year, SeaWorld Orlando opened the first hypercoaster in Florida, which is a roller coaster over 200 feet in height for those of you who are unaware, and that coaster of which is Mako. I rode this coaster then as my tallest and fastest credit at the time, and it quickly became my favorite coaster credit overall. The ride would rank very highly in my coaster rankings for years, and it would be one of my tallest and fastest credits for years as well. In January of 2017, I visited the best theme park for thrill coasters in Florida, that of which being Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. This park introduced me to my first B&M dive coaster, SheiKra, as well as some other great coasters like Cheetah Hunt, Montu, and Kumba. I did not have the courage to conquer the ride's drop tower attraction, Falcon's Fury, but I would later revisit the park in November of that year to face it, and I found it to be a very fun and thrilling ride. In June of that year, my grandparents took me, my sister, and my cousins on a vacation to the Smoky Mountains. We initially stayed at a log cabin in Cherokee, North Carolina. Then we went over to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and stayed at a hotel there. During this trip is when I visited Dollywood for the first time, and this park actually remains my favorite theme park overall to this day. It has such a nice park atmosphere, it's well decorated and has great theming on some of the attractions, and it features a great coaster collection. This park introduced me to my first RMC coaster, Lightning Rod, which had somewhat opened the year prior. This coaster was infamous for its downtime, but I managed to get 2 rides on it in its original, fully wooden form. I found this to be my new favorite coaster, and it would remain at that #1 spot for years. I also got to ride the other coasters in the park such as Thunderhead, Mystery Mine, Fire Chaser Express, Wild Eagle, and Tennessee Tornado, all of which I found to be very fun. The following year would not be quite as credit heavy, but I managed to visit a park for the first time, that of which being Fun Spot America in Orlando. I visited this park in January of 2018 and rode both of its coasters. One of which, White Lightning, is a GCI wooden coaster that I found to be fun and got several rides on, but I still didn't have the roughness tolerance I do today, so I might enjoy it a little more if I rode it again. I also rode the park's Vekoma family suspended coaster, Freedom Flyer, which also became my first and only VR coaster experience. In addition to these, I rode several flat rides in the park, and I found the park to have a great collection of flat rides. 2019 would be even less credit heavy, since I only got 1 new credit that year, but I really enjoyed this new credit, maybe even a little too much at the time. In the early summer of that year, I rode Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Islands of Adventure, an Intamin family motorbike multi-launch coaster that I found to be the best coaster at Universal Orlando Resort, and one of my favorites overall at the time. I found it to be a very exhilarating and unique experience for sure, and I was absolutely blown away when I rode it for the first time, even after waiting in a 3-hour line to ride it. 2020 would be an interesting year for sure. Everyone knows about it, the pandemic and everything, but the latter half of that year was when I actually experienced a renewal in my interest in coasters. In the couple of years prior, my interest in coasters declined and I wasn't as passionate about them. At the start of that year, I would still be kind of in that same boat, but I did get my first premier ride Skyrocket 2 credit, Tigress at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay in February of 2020. During the COVID lockdown, I still wasn't much of a coaster enthusiast, but when many parks began reopening during that summer, I did gain a renewed desire to visit different theme parks, and part of the reason this happened was because I heard about the new coasters opening up at Kings Island and Hershey Park despite the pandemic. I revisited my home parks during that summer and fall, and in October of that year I would take a major park trip for the first time in a while. I revisited the Smoky Mountains and stayed at a log cabin in Pigeon Forge, and of course I revisited Dollywood. Unfortunately, I failed to do my research beforehand on Lightning Rod, and it was closed during my visit due to renovation. However, I still had a great time at the park, and my roughness tolerance was increased when I rode Thunderhead during that visit, since it quickly became one of my favorite coasters at the time. After Dollywood, I got my first Alpine credits, the first one of which being Smoky Mountain Alpine Coaster in Pigeon Forge, and on the way back I discovered an Alpine coaster in the unique town of Helen, Georgia, called Georgia Mountain Coaster. Both of these were fun coasters, and although Smoky Mountain Alpine Coaster provided the longer ride experience, I slightly prefer Georgia Mountain Coaster for its comfortableness, its sense of speed, and its setting. And then the following year, 2021, was probably my most influential year as a coaster enthusiast. I started off in late January visiting Fun Spot America in Kissimmee, Florida for the first time, getting a few credits such as Mindblower and Hurricane. Up until May of that year, I was making videos on my Austin's Life channel about roller coasters and theme parks, but I wanted to create a separate channel to attract a more specific audience. Therefore, I created this channel on May 14th, 2021, and have been posting theme park content on it since then. Shortly after that, I got an early ride on Velocicoaster, which made up my earliest theme park vlog. A couple months later, I got the opportunity to experience what every North American coaster enthusiast wants to experience. I got the chance to visit Ohio for the first time. Most people would hear this and question why that's so exciting, but I was able to visit a couple of major theme parks in Ohio. The first of which was Cedar Point, which is basically the coaster enthusiast version of Disney World. It has the most stacked coaster collection of any theme park in the world. Despite visiting on a holiday weekend with no fast lane passes, I rode most of the coasters in the park, such as my current favorite coaster Steel Vengeance, an RMC hybrid roller coaster, and my tallest and fastest, and now somewhat defunct coaster credit, Top Thrill Dragster, an Intamin hydraulic launch coaster that is, again, super tall and super fast, very short ride experience, but definitely very thrilling for sure. The other park I visited in Ohio was Kings Island, which I preferred as a park overall because of its more relaxed atmosphere and nicer park appearance. I rode some great rides here such as Mystic Timbers, Orion, and Diamondback, and I also rode all of the coasters here except for one kiddie credit, and I was able to do so especially since I got a fast lane pass at this park. Later that same month, I took a trip to Charlotte, North Carolina, and visited Carowinds for the first time, which is where I rode my 100th coaster credit, Fury 325, a B&M Giga coaster that remains as my favorite B&M coaster that I've ridden. And now we come to this year, 2022, which has also been quite the major year for me as a coaster enthusiast. I started off getting some SeaWorld credits such as Icebreaker at SeaWorld Orlando and Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay, the second of which being my favorite coaster that I've ridden this year. I then got the opportunity in June to visit both Washington, D.C. and a couple of the Virginia parks, those of which being Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Kings Dominion in Doswell. I found both of them to be great parks with great coaster collections and park atmospheres. Some of the highlight coasters of this trip were Pantheon, Verbolten, Intimidator 305, and Twisted Timbers. Later that month, I got to ride the best Disney coaster ever made, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, and then in July, I was blessed enough to get the opportunity to revisit the DC area. During this trip, I got a couple new theme park experiences, the first of which was Six Flags America in Bowie, Maryland. My initial expectations were pretty low for this park, but I was excited to be able to give a Six Flags park a proper visit for once. I actually found this park to be quite underrated. Superman Ride of Steel is what I find to be an underrated hypercoaster, and I also enjoyed rides like Batwing and Joker's Jinx. I also liked how this park literally had no longer than a station wait in each of the coaster queues, with the one exception to that being Raging Cajun. Even if there are a lot of mid coasters at that park, I still had a great time. My second theme park experience on that trip was Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and oh boy was this a weird theme park visit. I visited on a very crowded day, and after getting a fast track pass, I rode Candymonium and Skyrush, the second of which being an amazing coaster in my opinion, but a polarizing coaster in the eyes of coaster enthusiasts. Unfortunately, after those two, it rained for several hours, making me worried that I wasted that park day, especially since all the rides, or at least all the outdoor coasters, closed because of the rain. However, after eating dinner, the rain cleared up in time that I got to ride all but two of the remaining coasters, and these coasters I rode included Storm Runner, Fahrenheit, Great Bear, and the now defunct Wildcat. That was my last major theme park trip in which I got new coaster credits, and that's also where I got my last coaster credit, bringing me up to 147 coaster credits today. I hope to ride even more new credits next year, but I already see how far I've come as a coaster enthusiast, not only within these past 8 years that I've discussed in this video, but also in the past year and a half that I've had this channel, Conquering Coasters. When I first started this channel, I had 66 coaster credits, and I've gotten 81 credits since then. I'm certainly glad that I've been blessed with new experiences, especially considering how passionate I really am about roller coasters. Anyway, that's gonna be all for this video, but I wanted to close by thanking y'all so much for 100 subscribers on YouTube and 1,000 followers on Instagram. Words cannot describe how much I appreciate the support, so again, thank y'all so very much. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoy this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye guys.